Okay, I'm going to call the meeting to order. Bienvenue à la réunion numéro 140.
Welcome to meeting number 145 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Access to Information, Privacy and Ethics. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Tuesday, October 29th, 2024, the committee is resuming its study of privacy breaches at the Canada Revenue Agency. I would like to welcome our witnesses for the first hour.
Our block. I want to welcome Mr. Peter Davis, who is the Associate Vice President of Government and Stakeholder Relations. Mr. Davis, welcome to committee. You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee, and then we'll be following that with questions. Go ahead, sir.
Great. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you to the committee members for the opportunity to appear on behalf of H&R Block Canada today. And I do appreciate the committee's patience and flexibility in accommodating my schedule. This year, H&R Block Canada is proud to be celebrating our 60th anniversary, helping Canadians with their taxes and receiving their benefits. Back in 1964, H&R Block Canada's first tax office was established in Toronto, and our national headquarters is proudly located in Calgary today. Throughout our 60 years in Canada, our company has grown to nearly 1,000 locations and 10,000 H&R Block Canada associates, serving Canadians in every corner of the country during tax season. I'd like to reiterate some key points from our earlier November 15 statement and our December 6 submission to the committee. Throughout our more than 6 decades of operation, H&R Block Canada has placed the utmost priority on ensuring the protection and privacy of our clients' tax information. H&R Block Canada is proud of our retail office's privacy framework, which is among the best in Canada. We understand the important responsibilities and obligations that come with safeguarding Canadians' personal information, and we have robust security systems and processes in place to protect this information. Given H&R Block Canada's commitment to data privacy and security, when we became aware of the incident involving our e-file credentials, we immediately conducted a comprehensive internal investigation and concluded that H&R Block Canada's data, systems, and software were not compromised, nor are we aware of any impact to our clients. I would also like to assure this committee that H&R Block Canada has never sent any Canadians' personal data, including pixels, to companies such as Google and Meta. While we are aware of past media reports in the U.S. regarding this issue, we can also confirm that the pixel usage described in those reports does not apply to H&R Block Canada clients. I would also like to assure this, allow me to take a moment to speak on behalf of our broader industry. As co-chair of Tax Filer Empowerment Canada, the National Trade Association for Canada's tax preparation and software industry, I believe it is important to articulate the critical role of industry tax software in helping safeguard the personal information of Canadians. Tax software developed by industry for use by taxpayers directly or by tax professionals on behalf of their clients must undergo intense certification by CRA each year in order to be approved for use by the public and to be authorized for electronic filing of tax returns to CRA. Tax software providers must also ensure their products and services are compliant with Canadian privacy and data security legislation. These factors, along with industry innovation and ongoing investment to continuously enhance and evolve data security, afford Canadians many diverse industry options to choose from, where they can feel safe providing their personal information. Diversification mitigates cybersecurity risk, as threat actors have to attempt infiltrating several different secure IT systems, as opposed to just one system administered by CRA. With this in mind, along with the fact that CRA is a high-value target to threat actors that has experienced previous security breaches, the notion that taxpayers' information will be safer if it is solely controlled and managed by CRA through automatic filing or any type of government tax filing does not have credible basis. Before we move to questions that committee members may have, I would like to raise the following. This proceeding is very likely being monitored by threat actors, seeking opportunities to identify and exploit potential data security intelligence for criminal gain. As the largest assisted tax preparation company in Canada, H&R Block Canada closely monitors and defends against attempted cyber threats on a regular basis. Accordingly, any statements we provide as an organization regarding cybersecurity must be careful not to reveal sensitive information that could give threat actors any intelligence to assist with their criminal activities. Further, we are bound by Canadian privacy legislation and H&R Block Canada's client privacy and data security policies to ensure that no personal information of Canadian taxpayers is disclosed. Thank you again, Mr. Chair and committee members, for inviting me to appear today on behalf of H&R Block Canada, and I'm pleased to answer any questions that you may have to the best of my ability.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mr. Davis. And we're going to start with 6-minute rounds of questioning. Mr. Caputo is going to lead us off. Go ahead, Mr. Caputo.
Thank you, Mr. Davis, for being here, and thank you for your opening statement. What I took from that is that we're dealing with obviously a massive data privacy breach here. That's what really brings us to Parliament today. Is it fair to say that it's your position that this was not on H&R Block and this was solely on CRA?
As I mentioned, thank you for the question. As I mentioned in my statement and in earlier submissions to the committee, H&R Block Canada, when we were notified by CRA that there was a compromise of our e-file credentials, we immediately launched a comprehensive investigation, and we left no stone unturned. And throughout the course of that investigation and upon its conclusion, there was no evidence to suggest that H&R Block Canada's systems, software, or security apparatuses had been compromised in any way. As to where this compromise may have taken place, H&R Block Canada can't say for sure, other than we know it was not within our organization.
Thank you. Now, are you familiar with how things are done in the United States as in Canada, as I understand it? It's essentially between H&R Block and CRA. There isn't a lot of information sharing when it comes to cyber issues, but the United States does it a little bit differently. Are you familiar with all of that?
Just only at a cursory level, just here in my capacity today representing H&R Block Canada and our operations here in Canada. But I am familiar with some high-level aspects of collaboration between IRS and the tax preparation industry in the United States, such as the Security Summit, which is an annual gathering of both industry and IRS to share best practices about cybersecurity, talk about potential threats to the extent that that's possible and appropriate.
Now, you spoke about collaboration. Is it your view that that sort of collaboration that you just described, does that happen in Canada?
It doesn't currently happen in Canada, and it is something that our company and industry has recommended to CRA in the past, and we continue to recommend that to the extent possible, we would like to see more collaboration between the agency and the industry to combat fraud and any other type of cybersecurity threats.
Do you know how long you've been recommending greater collaboration with CRA to address these increasing cyber threats?
It's come up in industry conversations with CRA off and on over the last, I would say, approximately 2 to 3 years.
Okay. Can I ask, what has CRA's response been?
They have always expressed receptiveness to the idea. I think one of the challenges that CRA has communicated to us with that concept is how can something like that be put together and still respect Canadian data privacy legislation. And so that our understanding is CRA is looking into that, and hopefully once we have a clearer picture of what may be possible, we can potentially explore moving that forward.
On behalf of H&R Block, do you see that as an impediment?
Do I see what as an impediment?
Just what you just described, the protection of privacy as an impediment to greater collaboration. If that's CRA's issue, what I'm saying is, do you agree with them in that regard?
Well, I would say that to the extent that it's preventing CRA from being able to collaborate where appropriate with industry and with our organization, then yes, it would be an impediment.
Okay. Now, in terms of the data breach, the information sharing, and the cyber threats that bring us here today, do you feel that there was any area in which CRA did not act as quickly as it could?
I'm not in a position to answer that, just given that we did not have line of sight into CRA's investigation and most of their mitigating measures that they may have employed. So I'm not able to answer that with any accuracy.
Do you feel that their communication with H&R Block was done in a timely manner?
Yes, In terms of notifying us when this incident may have began, yes, that communication, I believe, did happen in an expedient manner.
Okay. Sorry, Mr. Chair, how much time do I have left?
Minute and a half, Mr.
Okay.
Caputo.
So I want to get into that a little bit more. When is your understanding of when the breaches came to light, and when was H&R Block notified?
So we were notified in April of this year. I'm not able to disclose the exact date just for security purposes, but we were notified in April of this year, and immediately upon being notified, we launched our investigation into our systems, software, and security apparatuses.
Okay. And to the best of your knowledge, did any of your clients have any losses as a result of this?
We are not aware of any impact to our clients as a result of this incident.
Okay. And do you know exactly how many clients were impacted by this?
We do not know how many Canadians may have been impacted by this, no.
Okay. Do you have an estimate even?
No, nothing that is based on anything factual, so.
Okay. Have you made safety recommendations to CRA based on what happened on your end?
Yes, we did provide a series of recommendations to CRA in August of this year. And our understanding is that CRA is continuing to review them, and we're looking forward to engaging with them as soon as we possibly can.
Okay. Has CRA given you an update as to whether or not they will be accepting them, where the progress is? I mean, my concern is this. We're now in December. These are made in August. We don't want to be in a situation where we're here again. So I'm just wondering.
Mr. Caputo,
Okay.
I'm sorry, time's up. Mr. Fisher, go ahead for 6, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Peter. Nice to meet you today. Thanks for being here. Some of the things that are asked might be things that were asked and phrased in different ways, but are all going to be about the same topic. So I'm interested, the letter that you sent to our committee, you said, and I quote, or H&R Block Canada said, and I quote, H&R Block Canada's data, systems, software, and security measures have not been compromised. I'm interested in when you talk about the codes that are assigned to your tax preparer offices. Tell me a little bit, tell the committee a little bit about your internal strategies, your policies to ensure that there is security for those codes.
Okay, thank you for the question. I will attempt to answer that to the extent possible, just given that I'm unable to share quite a few specifics just in relation to this question, just given that it does bump up against our security and client privacy policies. But what I can say is that e-file IDs are issued by CRA to tax preparer offices, and the expectation is that those IDs are treated with the utmost confidentiality.
Have you had any issues? Any issues with those codes?
No.
Never
No, we have
had
not.
never had a leak of those codes?
No.
How do you guarantee that your staff might not be the source of the leak that we're talking about today?
That was part of the investigation that we undertook, and as I mentioned earlier, we left no stone unturned. We did a comprehensive review of just about everything that's relating to e-file ID credentials and how they are used within our organization. And there was no evidence to suggest that our staff were in any way involved or responsible for what took place.
How do you, when you're sourcing out new staff, do you do criminal record checks and things like that?
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
Yes, we do criminal background checks on all of our associates.
So everyone that comes in, or only the people that would deal with these codes?
Everyone that comes in.
Tell me a little bit about your recruiting process when you're going out to search for new folks. Training process, is that, could you maybe tell us a little bit about
Sure.
how you would train these folks up to be in a position where they understand the importance of being in possession of this taxpayer information, this data?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So each year we have what's called H&R Block Canada's Tax Academy, and starting in and around the late summer, we begin taking applications from interested Canadians who want to take our training and become tax associates with us. And through that process, we teach them all about the tax code, how to work with Canadians in preparing and filing their taxes, and we also spend time talking about security measures and how to ensure that taxpayer data is being treated with the utmost confidentiality at all times. And this also includes information that is required in order to electronically file returns to CRA. So there's quite a bit of training on that end. And then for those individuals who we do choose to hire from our tax academy, we also provide additional training to them before they start with us preparing and filing taxes in our offices. So there's quite a bit of security and privacy training, and that's held annually for all of our staff every year.
And I assume that would be the norm within the industry for third parties, private sector organizations?
I can't speak for all organizations, but it's certainly a norm for H&R Block Canada.
Okay, so when H&R Block Canada transmits a tax return to the CRA on behalf of the Canadian taxpayer, obviously through e-file, from your end, how do you ensure that the data is secure?
So that information is transmitted through tax software, which is certified by the Canada Revenue Agency. We have to go, every tax software developer, including H&R Block Canada, has to undergo a rigorous certification process with CRA every year to ensure that our tax software meets a number of CRA requirements. But in addition to that, we also have to make sure that tax software also complies with all data privacy and data security legislation. And so there's a very comprehensive process that goes into ensuring that that tax software is safe and secure for Canadians to use.
Have you had any breaches of any kind at H&R Block Canada of your clients' data?
I'm unable to talk about any specifics around privacy breaches just due to our data security and privacy policies. But what I can say is that...
Point of order. Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead on your point of order.
Mr. Chair, perhaps Mr. Davis isn't familiar with parliamentary proceedings or the powers of committee to demand testimony. He doesn't have the ability, unfortunately, to sit behind some kind of pseudo-client solicitor privilege. He's here before Parliament. He has to answer parliamentary questions. And so I would just ask that you apprise him of what his responsibilities are before committee.
Okay, thank you for that, Mr. Green. I understand the sensitive nature, Mr. Davis, of the security systems, the mechanisms that are in place within H&R Block, and you made that very clear in your opening statement. I would ask that you do answer the questions to the best of your ability. Yes, we are covered by parliamentary privilege, but we certainly don't want to put at risk, and I would agree with you on this, any proprietary issues within H&R Block that could cause problems. So I'm going to direct you in that way. Mr. Green, I hope you understand that when the request was made to have H&R Block come before the committee, that there wasn't a specific individual that was asked to come. H&R Block has sent Mr. Davis as a representative, and I am satisfied that he's answering the questions to the best of his ability, given the nature of what we're dealing with. I've stopped your time, Mr. Fisher, when the point of order was issued, so you've got a minute left.
Okay. Can you confirm, you may have already said this, but can you confirm that all of H&R Block Canada's client data is stored solely on servers 100% in Canada?
So our client data, in terms of how that information is stored, and this is all disclosed to our clients, and we do obtain their consent. There are instances where client data may be sent to the United States to our parent company, H&R Block, and those instances would include if that was required in order to provide the client with a specific product or service, or in some cases to notify them if there may be some products and services that they may wish to avail themselves to. But that data is just largely, it is stored there, and it is not included in any pixels or anything else that could be provided to other parties.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fisher.
Thank you.
Monsieur Villemure, commencez, s'il vous plaît. Mr. I hope, can you put your piece in, please? Make sure that it's on French translation. and that the volume is turned up so that you can, English translation. Thank you, Ms. Shanahan. And just make sure that the volume is up so you can hear it. Okay. Monsieur Villemure, pour 6 minutes. Commencez. Yeah.
Merci beaucoup, M. Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Davies, for being with us today. I will not repeat the questions from my colleagues, which were all very relevant, but I will talk about privacy issues. Can you describe to us, H&R Block Canada, what kinds of policies do you have in terms of protecting people's privacy?
Can I ask that the question just be repeated? The last part just cut out a little bit there.
Oui, si vous pouviez nous
If you can please describe to us the policy you have when it comes to protecting people's privacy.
Yes, thank you for the question. And so we have a number of client privacy policies in place at H&R Block Canada. I think the one that I'd like to highlight for the committee is what we call our privacy assurance form. And so this is what we consider to be a gold standard amongst the industry here in Canada. And so we take the time to sit down with our clients in our offices and explain to them how their data is being used by H&R Block Canada and why. And so we take great considerations in limiting the use of the data to just ensure that it's used for what the client needs in order to have the products and services that they expect. And so we sit down, we talk through how this data is used, and we talk about a number of provisions related to it, and we seek the client's consent in order to proceed as we've laid out. And what makes our privacy assurance policy a little unique is that each year, when our clients come back to see us in following tax seasons, we will also walk through any changes to that privacy insurance form. It's very important to us that our clients understand the importance that we place on protecting their data, and we want them to be informed and comfortable with the processes that we have in place to protect their personal information.
So you might be familiar with the GDPR, so the EU legislation on data protection. So your gold standard, is it up to the same level, or would it be up to the level that is required by Canadian legislation?
It is, thank you. It is certainly what is required by Canadian legislation. I don't know offhand for sure if it's also compliant with GDPR. I will follow up in writing once I get some confirmation on that.
Parfait, merci beaucoup. Vous parliez à l'instant.
Great, thank you. You were talking about getting people's consent. Do you believe that your client at H&R Block, do they understand what they are really consenting to?
Thank you for the question. We take great pains at H&R Block Canada to make sure that our clients do really understand how we use their information in order to provide them the products and services that they expect. And so our tax professionals across Canada are trained to really invest the time and really sit down and explain in plain language what our privacy protections and what our privacy protections look like and what our data policies are. And so I can say with a high level of confidence that our clients do have a good understanding of how their data is used.
OK. Souvent, les formulaires de consent.
Because often consent forms is just one page and it's in legalese. That's why I wanted to ask the question. How much time will you keep a client's data after their taxes are filed?
So we will keep their information as per statutory requirements, which I believe is the tax year and then 6 years in addition to that, and so 7 years. And then I'm not aware of any other retention that we do beyond that, but I will confirm that and follow up with the committee in writing.
Et au bout de la période de rétention,
At the end of the retention period, how do you dispose of the data coming from people's tax declarations?
Thank you for the question. We undergo a very comprehensive process to ensure that all personal information, once it's no longer required to be retained, is completely destroyed. And it's very comprehensive.
Est-ce que vous pourriez nous décrire la...
Can you describe how you go about doing that?
I probably cannot provide much more information on that, just given our data security and privacy policy, I'm afraid. I will check with our office to see if there's any more details that we may be able to provide, and I will follow up in writing on that.
D'accord. Je serai tout à fait.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay, merci, Monsieur Ville.
Thank you, Mr. Villemure.
Clear, Mr. Davis. The clerk has been noting the answers where you will be following up in writing, and then she's going to follow up with you to ensure that that information does come to the committee. And that, I mean, that is a reasonable compromise that the committee can deal with when it comes to sensitive information, providing it in confidence to the committee as well. So, okay, Mr. Green, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Davis, you'd referenced that in your opening remarks that H&R Block has never sent any client's personal information, personal data, including pixels, to companies such as Google and Meta. You referenced, of course, that this is H&R Block Canada. Can you describe, for the purpose of this committee, who actually owns the proprietary data that H&R Block has? You, the Canadian subsidiary or the American parent company?
When you say proprietary data, you mean exactly what?
The personal information of your clients, sir. You mentioned that some of it goes down to the States. Would it not venture that as a subsidiary of H&R Block Incorporated in Missouri, that all of the information would be owned by the parent company as well?
So we don't own the information that Canadians provide us. It is between H&R Block Canada and our clients. And so I want to be careful how I answer your question, though, because I don't know all of the ins and outs and legalities of who would actually be ultimately the holder of that information. So if you don't
I'll
mind,
put this to you, sir. Mr. Davis, I have limited time. I'll take my time back. You referenced specifically H&R Block Canada has never sent clients' personal data, including pixels, to companies such as Google and Meta. And yet in July of 2023, a United States Senate investigation determined that H&R Block most likely disclosed consumers' return information to Meta in violation of Section 22, subsection 6713 and 7216 by embedding Meta's Pixel within H&R Block's mobile and website tools that consumers use to prepare for their personal tax returns. Sir, are you familiar with the current class action lawsuit being filed against H&R Block in the United States?
Yes, so we take the security of our clients' personal information.
I just asked you if you were aware of it.
I am aware of it.
If you're aware of it.
Yes.
Okay. And so you're aware that that lawsuit comes under the RICO laws, which is Racketeering, Influenced, or Corrupt Organizations Act, against the tax preparation company, your parent company, and Meta. So this is a practice that has been established by your parent corporation, and yet it's your testimony here with a surety that H&R Block Canada has never sent any clients' personal information. Can you make that assurance on the record here today in this committee that the same can't be said for your parent company in the States?
Well, I'm here in my capacity as a representative of H&R Block Canada, here to talk about our Canadian clients and Canadian taxpayers. And I can say with certainty that their data is not shared with companies like Google and Meta.
By H&R Block Canada?
Correct.
That wasn't my question. My question is, can you make that same assurance on behalf of your parent company, which is currently under investigation for the very same practices that you're being accused of here in Canada? Can you make that assurance to us?
So when it comes to the data of our Canadian clients, neither H&R Block Canada or H&R Block are disclosing that data to companies like Google and Meta.
So that only happened in the United States of America?
I can't speak to where it may have happened. I'm here in my capacity as a representative of H&R Block Canada. What I can say with certainty is that our Canadian clients' data was not involved in any sharing whatsoever with companies like Google and Meta, whether by H&R Block Canada or H&R Block.
But you are familiar that a Senate hearing determined that in the United States?
Mm-hmm. Yes,
So it's not a wild assertion that you would also be doing the same practices, given that you're a subsidiary of a parent company that's being accused of the same thing.
we're not sharing any Canadians' data with companies like Google or Meta at H&R Block Canada or H&R Block.
I have a question. It's a consumer question, and it's related to the FTC's action that stopped H&R Block's unfair downgrading practices and deceptive promises from free filing. Do you also offer this same type of free filing here in Canada?
I can't speak on specific filing products and services by H&R Block. I can speak a little bit about what we do offer here at H&R Block Canada.
Sir, I'm going to ask you the question. Are you familiar that the FTC, that your parent company, was required to pay $7 million to consumers?
I am familiar with the action by the FTC.
And so I'm asking you if the product that is just resulted in a settlement there is also offered here in Canada.
No, it is not.
Okay, that will suffice for my round of questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. That concludes the first round. We're now going to go to the second round. We've got 5 minutes, and Mr. Chambers is going to kick it off. Mr. Chambers.
Thank you, Chair. Mr. Davis, thank you for coming. I apologize for missing your earlier round. Someone has played a funny trick on me this holiday season, and they sent the Minister of CRA at the same time to the Finance Committee, so that's where I was for the first few minutes. I just want to bring me back to the issue at hand here. Does H&R Block Canada have obligations under the Privacy Act, the Federal Privacy Commissioner and the Federal Privacy Act?
Yes, with respect to the issue the committee.
Just in general?
Yes, we do.
Okay. And so under that act, if there is a data breach, since H&R Block would be kind of governed under the provisions of that act, or subject to the provisions of that act, if there was a data breach, H&R Block would be required to, if it was known to them, report on that data breach to the Privacy Commissioner. There's a reporting regime.
That is correct, yes.
That's right. And to my knowledge, there has not been a report from H&R Block to the Privacy Commissioner with respect to any breaches, including the ones that were in the news recently. Is that correct?
Yes, given that our investigation, once we were informed by CRA of the incident involving our e-file credentials, after we commenced our investigation immediately after learning about it, we went through a comprehensive investigative process, and its conclusion pointed to no evidence of any breach of our systems or software or security apparatuses at H&R Block Canada. So as a result, there was no requirement or basis for us to report anything to the Privacy Commissioner.
Right. So I assume with your parent company, you obviously, not only do you invest a lot of resources in terms of treasure into cyber security and privacy breaches, but that you would share information about potential schemes or frauds that are perpetrated on various tax authorities, say in Canada and the U.S. Like you're aware of some of the things that happen and how people's accounts do get hacked, correct?
Well, we are aware from what we see in the media sources that we monitor in a lot of cases. It's not typical for CRA to share that type of information with industry as of yet, and of course, there's also some information sharing between H&R Block and H&R Block Canada Inc. when it comes to cybersecurity.
And so, I mean, in an effect, privacy, and I think I'm getting from your testimony, people's personal information, their tax information, but more importantly, their private personal information, that is a core principle of what, guides you as an organization, right? So, I mean, you have a lot on the line in order to protect people's personal information, but their privacy in general.
Absolutely. We've been doing taxes in Canada for our clients for over 60 years, and so data protection and privacy of our clients' information is absolutely paramount to what we do.
I won't ask you to answer this because it would potentially be unfair, but it is your business to keep people's information private and secure, and there have been a number of other examples of outright frauds perpetrated on CRA with a number of examples of fraud happening on the taxpayer, fraudulent schemes, things that are not audited correctly at CRA. And so the absence of you reporting anything to the Privacy Commissioner tells me that this issue is likely not one that is emanating from within H&R Block, but it could be an outside source. Whether that's a third party or maybe even within CRA, I'm not sure. I won't ask you to comment because I think that might put you in a difficult position. But you know, when you have CRA that says, well, it's not us, but they have a list of kind of examples in the past of where they've had some challenges with fraud and protecting private information, you know, that makes sense to me. I think your testimony is genuine, and I hope to the extent that you find any information that you will bring it forward. And can you just follow up? You mentioned about CRA not collaborating as much with industry, but that does happen in the U.S., correct?
My understanding is there's mechanisms for collaboration between the IRS and the tax preparation industry in the United States, namely the Security Summit. We don't have a similar mechanism here in Canada, and that is something that I would submit would be beneficial for
Thank you for
CRA
that
to
testimony,
consider.
Mr. Davis, and congratulations on 60 years in business.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Mr. Chambers, Ms. Shanahan, 5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. And I want to touch on a few things, but basically I want to make the distinction between why we're here now, having to do with that Fifth Estate report, that it was through a fraudulent use of H&R Block's special credentials to access CRA, the CRA website, something that's been built up with private companies and the CRA over the last couple of decades, right, with the use of online filing. That somehow somebody got those credentials and they used them to change information, to pose to as imposters to access the CRA website. And the other bucket, which has to do with sharing of client information, private sharing of clients' private information. So on the first thing, I just find it curious, your lack of curiosity about how that came to be, your lack of cooperation, your company's lack of cooperation, because historically I think there has been tremendous cooperation between private tax preparer companies and the CRA to make sure that this wouldn't happen.
Well, I wouldn't say that there hasn't been cooperation. We have certainly, to the extent possible, throughout this incident, been in communication with CRA, and we have...
Mr. Davis, what would make the CRA say that it was H&R Block?
I'm sorry, the CRA say that it was H&R Block for...
Well, that's the report that we have, or that's they allege that hackers had obtained confidential data used by H&R Block, and that it had to do with the confidential credentials that the H&R Block uses to access the CRA. So someone somehow in H&R Block could be an employee, could be someone who had access, could be a third party, as Mr. Chambers alluded to, and I want to get to that in just a moment.
Okay, thank you. To be clear, we, as I mentioned earlier, we take the utmost of utmost seriousness the protection of our clients' personal information. And I just want to reiterate.
No, it's not the personal information. Somehow somebody got the hold of your codes.
Yes.
Because why would the CRA say that there was the H&R codes that were used?
So I was just going to get to that. And so our investigation did not suggest in any way, shape, or form that our systems were compromised or our security apparatuses or our software.
So your contention is that your codes were not used in this breach? That's
no,
your contention?
No, my contention is that H&R Block Canada and our software systems and security apparatuses were not compromised, and so we were not responsible for...
Okay, so you go back to that, but somebody could have still used your codes, left them sort of untouched, but used them, so that you would not know that they, in fact, had been used. It was CRA on the other side that said, these codes are being used.
Yes, and we've never heard from CRA in any way, shape, or form that they believe that this information was compromised by H&R Block Canada.
Okay, so we'll put that aside, because I really do think that it's important that there is cooperation amongst all parties in this regard now and in the future. But around the disclosure of personal information, in fact, it is in your website, and sorry, I do have to print things out because, I'm old school. But you do say, we do not disclose your personal information to third parties except as described in the privacy policy with your consent or as permitted required by law, and your personal information may be disclosed. So I take Mr. Villemur's point that people do not always know what they are consenting to, but here's what they're consenting to, that it be used by outside suppliers employed or retained by you or H&R Block US to perform certain services and functions, which include, of course, the processing of transactions, marketing, the instant refund processing, et cetera, et cetera. So that's there for others who want to read. I have a second copy if people want to read it. But also that this information would be used and stored in the United States and will be in addition to Canadian laws, subject to the laws of the United States. But I think that that's something that many Canadians would not know, that their information is being stored in the United States, which can be an issue for some people.
We're past your time, Ms. Shanahan.
Mr. Chair,
I'm going to give you a chance to respond.
Thank you.
Excellent.
Go ahead, please.
I just would like to point out, as I mentioned earlier, that we take great pride in our client privacy framework that we have in our retail offices at H&R Block Canada. And so a big part of that is walking through with our clients through our privacy assurance form process exactly how their information is being used in order to provide the products and services that they expect. So the items that you were referring to are items that we do walk through with our clients. We make sure they understand what that means, and we make sure to get their consent.
Okay,
and so,
thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Davis. Monsieur Villemur, 2 minutes et 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Thank you very much, Chair. Mr. Davis, I'll just give you some time so that you can readjust. So, breaches of client information, has it happened before at H&R Block?
Thank you for the question. I'm not able, due to our data security and privacy policy, I'm not able to discuss any sort of details about that particular subject matter. But what I can tell the committee...
Point of order?
No.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead, Mr. Green, on your point
Mr.
of
Chair,
order.
I don't think Mr. Davis quite understands what process he's in right now. This is not like a textbook, response that he can provide Parliament and not actually have to answer basic questions. If he's not comfortable answering these questions at committee, through you, Mr. Chair, I would request that he provide that to our committee in writing, if he's not wanting to do it on the record right now in front of the audience, for our consideration of this committee. We could then determine the worthiness of reporting on it, but he can't simply come here to committee, a parliamentary committee of the House of Commons, and refuse to answer basic questions.
Yeah, just let me deal with this, Mr. Davis. And Mr. Green, I fully agree with your assessment on that that these answers can be provided in writing to the committee if it is the desire of the committee to do so. I mean, if that's what you want to do, Mr. Green, if we want to provide information to the committee, we can certainly do that. I believe that Mr. Davis is sincere in his attempts to answer the committee's questions. And again, as I said earlier, I understand that there's also some sensitive nature, and if the nature of the questions are sensitive enough, then we can request a written response from Mr. Davis on these issues for the sake and benefit of the committee. And Mr. Barrett,
on that point of order,
on that point of order, go ahead, sir.
Yeah.
And Mr. Villemot, j'ai arrêté le temps aussi. Okay.
Yeah, and so it's happened a couple of times. I fully agree with Mr. Green's intervention. Obviously, the witness is required to provide a fulsome answer to the best of their ability to any of the questions that are put forward by members of the committee. As you said, Chair, it's up to the committee if we're willing to accept an answer in writing. That's the proposal of Mr. Green. I don't have any objection to that. It should be noted, though, that it remains the committee's prerogative on whether or not that information is held in confidence or if we publish that information. And so if it's in the, perhaps simply put, in the public interest. But certainly there is no discretion on the part of the witness to answer or not to answer the question. And while we don't have an objection to the response, we don't have an objection to the response to this question from Mr. Villemure being provided in writing. An answer must be provided.
I think based on the 2 points of orders, it's pretty clear where the committee stands on this, Mr. Davis. And and I don't want to speak for other members of the committee, but if it's your contention that this information can be provided to the committee, then I would recommend that you do that, and the committee will dispose of it in whatever fashion it determines, based on how it affects this study for us as well, because this is a very serious issue for Canadians, and that's so I hope you understand that. Okay, there is another option for the committee too, and that is to go in camera and deal with this, but I don't really want to entertain that unless it's the will of the committee to do that. So, Mr. Green, are you okay with that?
Yeah, just on the point of order, and this isn't particular to Mr. Davis. I know he's here in his capacity, but I just want the committee to note on this point of order that this is a long-standing trend that we're now seeing when corporations send their public relations or their government relations people and not the president. So I think moving forward, what we need to do with this committee in order to get fulsome answers is actually have people who have the power and the discretion to speak on behalf of the corporation that it is we're speaking to. So I would ask that you take that into consideration for future invitations.
Yeah, and I think we're going to have to be more specific when we do propose motions, who we want to come to the committee, to your point, Mr. Green. Correct? Okay. Monsieur Villemure, vous avez... Yeah.
Earlier point of order that was mentioned, I just wanted to clarify very quickly that if there ever was a situation where a breach of information would have occurred, our company would have been statutorily obligated to report.
Hold on. On n'a pas de traduction?
Des fois oui, des fois non.
Moi, je sais. Oui. Il faudrait entendre. Ça marche pas maintenant. It's not working at all. Peut-être c'est l'écouteur qui fonctionne pas. Sorry, Mr. Davis. I'm going to want to make sure that Mr. Villemure is hearing your point. And it's not. It's not really on the point of order. I've given you a little latitude on this one, Mr. Davis, just because we've been a little on less time than normal. Ça marche, monsieur? So if you want to just quickly state your point, the point you want to make.
Thank you very quickly. Yeah. So if there ever was a situation where information had been part of any type of breach, our organization would have been statutorily obligated to report that information to the Privacy Commissioner. So we're not trying to be evasive here in front of the committee, but we do have to also respect our privacy policies.
Wonderful.
Thank you.
J'ai commencé le temps, Monsieur Villemure, 2 minutes.
Mr. Villemure, you have 2 minutes. Thank you very much. So all of these elements were going to be part of my question. So what I will ask is, well, what actions did you take? For instance, did you go back and look whether similar situations had occurred in the past?
Thank you for the question. And you're referring to the incident with the e-file credentials specifically? Yes. So our investigation absolutely did address that piece as well, and there never has been an incident involving our e-file credentials in the past.
D'accord. Vous l'avez mentionné brièvement, mais
You briefly referred to it, but have you reported all breaches to the Privacy Commissioner of Canada?
I'm not an expert on reporting of privacy breaches, but what I can say is that if there was a situation where we were required to report something to the Privacy Commissioner, that absolutely would have taken place, yes.
OK. Est-ce que c'est possible de demander à votre équipe de nous...
Could you go back to your team and ask them to provide us a written answer if these reportings have been done?
Yes. Yes, I can. Thank you.
Parfait. Merci beaucoup, M. le Président.
Thank you very much, Chair.
Mr. Green, 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much. I would like to go back to the opening statements around the idea of private sector breaches and security. During his appearance on the 5th of December 2024, the Privacy Commission of Canada stated that data breaches represent one of the most significant threats to personal information globally. And he also noted in the 2023-2024 fiscal year, ending on March 31st, 2024, his office received over 350 reports of cyber instances. The vast majority, over 90%, were from private sector organizations. So, Mr. Davis, in your opinion, do these statistics show that cyber incidents are more frequent and more likely to occur in private sector organizations than in federal government institutions?
Thank you for the question. I'm not a privacy breach expert, and so I'm not able to offer an opinion on where breaches like these would tend to take place more often than not.
Mr. Davis, you came to provide expert testimony, and in your opening remarks, you said, quote unquote, there is no critical basis to support the notion that CRA automatic tax filing and pre-filed tax returns will further secure the taxpayer information. Based on the very, general statistic that I just provided you, how do you explain the difference between government breaches and private sector breaches?
I'm sorry, I don't see the connection between CRA automatic tax filing and potential breaches of information by the private sector. Can you clarify that for me a little?
Yeah, I'm happy to. That out of all of the incidences, 90% of the privacy breaches were from private sector organizations. Okay? 10% were from government. Would that logic not extend that private sector organizations are more vulnerable to privacy breaches?
As I stated earlier, I can't provide an opinion on statistics that I'm hearing just secondhand now, so I'm unable to make an informed judgment on that.
So, what do you think explains the difference?
Again, I can't speak or give an informed opinion on statistics that I'm hearing secondhand just now.
Okay. Well, I'll ask you this, Mr. Chair, through you to Mr. Davis. Can he please provide to the committee in writing the policy in the event of a breach of client data? So basically, what I'm requesting is H&R Block's Canada's policy in the event of a breach of information for client data.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green. Clerk's made a note of that. We'll follow up with Mr. Davis and make sure that that information is supplied. Mr. Barrett, for 5 minutes. Go ahead.
On December 6th, Chair, I gave notice of a motion that I'm going to move now, and that's that the committee undertake a review of the data privacy and contracting policies employed by Export Development Canada during the implementation of the Canada Emergency Business Account Program, that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and the committee invite the following witnesses to testify. A, Accenture CEO Julie Sweet and officials. B, EDC CEO Mareed Lavery and officials. And C, Auditor General of Canada Karen Hogan.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. The motion is in order. Any, okay? Do you want to speak on it? Okay, go ahead.
Indeed.
Mr. Davis, I am going to ask you to leave if you want. I expect that with the transition to the next panel and some discussion on this, that will conclude your testimony before the committee. As I said earlier, the clerk has made note of the requests of committee. She'll share that with you, and the expectation of the committee is that you'll send that back to us in a reasonable time frame. The clerk will provide a date to provide that information by, and it won't be Christmas Day, I guarantee you that. So thank you, Mr. Davis, for your testimony. I'm going to go to Mr. Barrett now. Thank you, sir. And go ahead.
Chair, just for everyone, if we can have the text of the motion.
Okay.
Usually you give us some indication of what's coming.
Madam Clerk, was that motion sent to committee members previously?
Yep.
December 6th.
Okay, yeah, so we'll send it out to you, but I'm going to go to Mr. Barrett to keep things going here. Ms. Shanahan, go ahead, Mr. Barrett.
Chair, on the 2nd of December, the Auditor General did issue a report that is the basis for this motion. This was Report 8 on the Canada Emergency Business Account with respect to the COVID-19 pandemic. It's an independent auditor's report. And on the 2nd of December, there was widespread media coverage on this very issue, and then notice of motion was given and distributed in both official languages to all members of the committee on December the 6th, so they've had ample time to become well apprised of both the motion and the situation in the official language of their choice. The Auditor General's reports, of course, are available in both English and French in their complete format online, and were available in printed format in advance of their tabling in the House in an embargoed form for all members. So, to the issue, Canada's Auditor General found that Export Development Canada gave $313 million in sole source contracts to administer loans. Now, the government selected EDC to administer this emergency loan program, and then EDC turned around and said, we don't have the capacity to do that, so we're going to outsource it. And they outsourced hundreds of millions of dollars in taxpayer contracts, and some of the details of these contracts are incredibly concerning. Now, they were paying 14 hours per day to Accenture and for their call center work, and the call center is only open for 9 hours a day. The hourly per person rate ranged between $60 per person per hour and $750 per person per hour. Now, equally concerning is that Accenture outsourced some of the work to a Brazilian subsidiary. So these folks who were receiving these generous is an understatement of these rates at $750 per person per hour to administer this program that EDC was supposed to be delivering. I'm quite certain that there's no members of the public service who, in their capacity as public servants, are being paid $750 per hour. We have a massive conflict of interest here, and I'll offer in concluding my brief remarks a quote from Karen Hogan, who is the Auditor General, and Auditor General Hogan said, quote, "Not managing that conflict of interest, in my mind, was unacceptable," end quote. And I couldn't agree more with the Auditor General. So this, of course, when we're dealing with Canadians' personal information, when we're dealing with Government of Canada programs, and when we're dealing with the type of conflict of interest that gave rise to a great concern and was deemed, quote, unacceptable, the conflict of interest being deemed unacceptable by the Auditor General. It, of course, fits within the mandate of this committee. It's important. I don't think that the study would take many meetings, but the mandate of this committee is dealing with those conflicts of interest. And so while other committees can do what other committees do, this committee should do what only it can do, and that's why I've put this motion forward today.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Barrett. I don't see anybody else. Well, you were on a point of order, Ms. Shanahan.
But I had put my hand up before.
Okay, that's fine.
And
I saw Mr. Drouin first, and then I'll go to Shanahan after that.
Very good.
Go ahead, Mr.
Looking at the screen?
Yep, I see. Actually, you know what? Sorry, Mr. Green, but in the backdrop, I was wondering whether your hand was up. In the backdrop, it's kind of contrasted against something red that makes it difficult to see. So I'm going to go to Mr. Green first, and then I'm going to go to Mr. Drouin, because I was wondering whether he had his hand up. I couldn't tell, so, but he did.
Yeah,
Okay,
just
go ahead.
thank
Sorry.
you very much. Just simple questions on the motion. There's no timeline for this, and I want to make it abundantly clear for this committee that I do not intend to be called back on some kind of surreptitious prerogative of the chair or on some 106. This is an important issue. I would agree, and I think this is one that deserves our full attention when we return, when the House is sitting. And so I want to be very clear about that and ask for you, Mr. Chair, if that is the intention of this motion, or is this something that they're looking to revive in the early weeks of January because there's a slow media cycle or something like that?
Question on that, Mr. Green, or?
That's a question. That's an honest question through you to the mover of the motion, because they did not provide a date to say when we return to the regular sitting of the House. Right now, it's just open, and I wouldn't want to be in a situation where we're called back from our constituents and our families.
Yeah. So the other issue here is it doesn't define the number of meetings as well, Mr. Green. I made note of that as well. So I'm going to go. Just do you want to respond to that quickly? Go ahead.
We would, of course, just be comfortable with an understanding in place of an amendment that the committee is operating with the understanding, the chair is charged with the understanding that for the purposes of this motion, that it be dealt with following the resumption of the House in the last week of January. So that's if the motion passes, I think that we can all have share that understanding without it being explicit. Okay. With respect to the number of meetings, I think it could be few.
Yeah, it would probably, based on the amount of witnesses that are there, probably no more than 2, right? No, we have no objection. Okay, so unfortunately, I'm going to need an amendment for that, unless there's unanimous consent on the part of the committee to adopt that no more than up to 2 meetings, or no more than 2 meetings be granted on this, okay? That way we have some clarity on it. Agreed? Well, we don't yet. I'm just asking, there's nothing in this motion that says how many meetings. So I'm going to ask for clarity and say that no more than 2 meetings be deemed for this particular motion. So.
Else before we entertain how many meetings we want to have?
Yeah, we can do that.
Still not sure.
Okay, so for the sake of clarity, I'm going to need somebody to tell me how many meetings they want on this. Okay, so that my suggestion was that in advance of hearing from people, and now so I'll leave it at that. But I'm going to go to Mr. Drouin. Go ahead, Mr. Drouin.
Je salue les efforts de mon.
Well, Mr. Barrett brought up this question of the Canada Emergency Business Account, because at the Public Accounts Committee, they are already doing a study on that, and we've been trying to do such a study at the Public Accounts Committee, and Conservatives have been filibustering. They don't even want to hear from witnesses. We had the Auditor General of Canada before us yesterday, and other witnesses, and Conservatives did filibustering. So before voting on this motion, could we please invite Mr. Barrett to talk to Mr. Perkins and Mr. Genuis and Mr. Cooper sometimes, who participates in those meetings, to maybe talk to his colleagues, because I am for efficiency and effectiveness of parliamentary committees. So if the Ethics Committee is going to do this study on public accounts, on the emergency business account, we don't want to waste taxpayers' money. So in that case, we will not do that at public accounts. I know it's Christmas. We are in a hurry to pass motions and go back and say that I did something. But I would invite my colleagues to have a discussion with their other parliamentary colleagues.
I want to make sure we're not doubling services or parliamentary accountability, and I truly believe in it. But we have many reports that the Auditor General has presented on December 2nd. We have one on seniors. We have one on Canada Summer Jobs that she has tabled. or that was tabled in the House. But let's make sure that our parliamentary committees function in a way that is efficient and it gets to the bottom of the issues, and that we're not stuck like SDTC doing something at Industry Canada, and at the same time we're doing the same studies, and it's the same members asking the same questions at both committees, and same witnesses. So I enjoy this idea, and I'm not a regular member at Ethics, but we're getting into doubling of services, and I'm sure that Conservatives would agree that this is not an efficient use of taxpayers' dollars when public accounts, unless they can convince their folks at public accounts that we'll let Ethics do this particular study, and public accounts will focus on other reports of the Auditor General, and then that way I will be satisfied in terms of the way it's functioning. And I'm sure my honourable member, as they want to form government, they would have already had these conversations with their colleagues to ensure greater efficiency of taxpayer dollars, the way it's spent, because we too spend dollars, and it's important that we show taxpayers respect.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Drouin. I mean, we're obligated to deal with the motion that's in front of us. The motion is in order. It deals with data privacy and the potential of, well, we don't know. We'll certainly find out if the motion is adopted by having these witnesses in, but I see it as separate and distinct from what other committees are dealing with right now. This is a data privacy motion, and it's well within the mandate of this committee. So go ahead, Ms. Shanahan, please.
Well, thank you, Chair. And, you know, I'm sorry that I didn't have the motion right handy. I've got a folder here, as you can see, with all the motions that have been presented in this committee. I do try to keep track. It is not easy to do so. So we can dispense with those ones, I suppose, for now, or keep them for a later date, or maybe they'll be revived. I don't know if anyone has any anyway, because it's just getting heavier and heavier, and that's not good for my back, I can tell you that. And sorry, I am old school. I do like paper, and it allows me to be able to read and analyze and take notes and so on. So, of course, I listened with great interest to my colleague of public accounts, and yeah, I think that there is something to be said here, because this is a topic that has come up on many an occasion, even in this committee, that we shouldn't be duplicating work. You know, there's by all accounts only limited time left to our mandate here, to the 44th Parliament, and we should make the best use of it. There's many issues that we need to be discussing. There's, I would think, and I'd like to have an update on that, Chair, reports perhaps that have been left unfinished, you know, work that needs to be continued. Other motions, apparently, that other members are interested in pursuing. So, you know, I appreciate the offer of limiting this study to 2 meetings, but how about 0 meetings, and let public accounts do its work? And indeed, while talking about letting somebody do their work, it has often been my observation that this committee attempts to do the work of our independent commissioners of Parliament. Namely the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, not to mention other commissioners from time to time, but chiefly the Conflict of Interest and Ethics Commissioner, where we try to sort of get ahead of where he is if there is an issue, and I'm sure that you know, members are very capable of alerting the commissioner if they feel that there's an issue of conflict of interest, as are, of course, any members of the public, anyone who is concerned with this situation, that they would make that known to the commissioner. And as we have seen him do before, in some cases repeatedly on the same complaint, 1, 2, 3, 4 times, to come back with the same conclusion. which apparently was not sufficient for members at that time. But still consistent with the role of an independent agent, officer of Parliament, that they do their work, they do their investigation, and they make a report. And that is something that I certainly would suggest. So as it stands, I cannot support this this motion. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Shanahan. And just for the benefit of the committee, we do have the CSIS director and other officials from CSIS in the room to discuss TikTok in our next panel. But I am going to go to Mr. Fisher because he's next on the list on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Then, in respect to the witnesses that are here, I'll be quick. This is being studied at another committee. I agree, it could be the purview of this committee. 2 meetings already have happened at Public Accounts. I've heard members of this committee state fairly emphatically that they don't support duplication, studying the same thing at 2 different committees. We'll see how they vote on this, but I'm not going to support this at the moment. It doesn't mean I wouldn't support it down the road, maybe post-Public Accounts study, but at this point I'd say I'd vote against this today, and we would get our witnesses in.
Go ahead, Mr. Housefather. You have the floor on the motion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will also be brief. I have looked at the. First of all, I have to say I disagree with my dear colleague Ms. Shanahan a little bit, because I do believe very strongly in oversight by committees of the work of the Auditor General and everybody else. Like I believe that is the role of parliamentarians. So I have no issue with that. My issue is I've looked at this report and I've looked at the summary of the report, and there's not one thing about privacy that's even included in the summary of the report. This is a report about financial controls and contracts, which is not the purview of ethics. It is the purview of Public Accounts, or OGO. And so I don't understand why this is being brought to ethics when I've looked just through the summary. Privacy is not even mentioned as one topic in the entire summary of the report. So for me, that really is the issue. It's not, if it's already being looked at Public Accounts, which I understand it is, and the focus is not privacy, then I really don't think it's the purview of the committee, although I think it would be fascinating to look at the contracting policies employed by EDC, which is part of this motion, but I just don't think it's the role of ethics. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Housefather. I have nobody else on my list, so I'm going to ask, and I suspect I know the answer, whether we have unanimous consent on this motion. We're going to ask for a recorded division, and go ahead, Madam Clerk, on the motion.
The vote is on the motion moved by Mr. Barrett. Mr. Baines?
No.
Mr. Fisher?
That's my friend.
Mr. Housefather?
Contre.
Monsieur Drouin?
Contre.
Ms. Shanahan?
No.
Mr. Barrett?
Yes.
Mr. Melillo?
Yes.
Mr. Cooper?
Yes.
Monsieur Villemur?
En faveur.
Mr. Green?
Yes.
Yeas 5, nays 5.
Okay, I vote yes.
Yeas 6, nays 5.
Okay, so the motion passes. I am going to suspend for a couple of minutes until we get the next panel in line here. Meeting suspended for a couple of minutes. Welcome back, everyone. Pursuant to Standing Order 1083H and the motion adopted by the committee on Thursday, November 21st, 2024, the committee is resuming its study of the windup of TikTok Technology Canada, Inc. I'd like to welcome our witnesses for the second hour today. From the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, Daniel Rogers is here as the director, and Paul Lind, the Assistant Deputy Minister, Intelligence Collection. I'm going to go to you, Mr. Rogers. You have up to 5 minutes to address the committee. Go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Monsieur le Président. Mesdames et Messieurs et les membres du comité, bonjour.
Ladies and gentlemen, members of the committee, hello. I have a brief statement. My name is Dan Rogers. I am the director of CSIS, and I'm joined by my colleague Paul Lind, who is the Assistant Deputy Minister responsible for intelligence collection. It is an honor to join you today and to have the opportunity to contribute to your important discussion on the winding up of TikTok Canada. I hope to provide insights to this committee on CSIS's role in ensuring the protection of Canada's national security interests, the safety of Canadians, and Canada's prosperity. The Investment Canada Act, which is administered by Innovation, Science and Economic Development Canada, ISED, ensures that significant investments in Canada by non-Canadians benefit Canada's economy. To this end, the Act allows the government to review foreign investments to ensure that they are not harmful to Canada's national security. The Act aims to strike a balance between promoting economic prosperity and safeguarding Canada from foreign actors seeking to gain ownership or control of sensitive Canadian goods, technology, infrastructure, or personal data for purposes that could be injurious to Canada's national security.
With its mandate, CSIS regularly screens ICA notifications for security concerns, and we work with ISED, Public Safety Canada, and other federal granting councils to inform the GC's decisions. This work is essential as Canada is a target for a number of adversarial state actors looking to advance their own national interests at our expense through their investment activities. Social media platforms in particular are of interest to threat actors because of the data that they generate and collect. They run surveys, collate data sets, and request access to users' personal data through terms and conditions, enabling access to photo albums, messages, and contact lists, among other sensitive details. Although some of this data is benign in isolation, when collected and collated on a scale, it can provide detailed patterns and insights on populations, public opinion, communities, and individual social and professional networks. Authoritarian states like the PRC use big data, including from the private sector, to carry out foreign interference activities. While government use of data in Canada is subject to ethical, legal, and privacy considerations, authoritarian states are not subject to these limitations. Through its 2017 National Intelligence Law, the PRC compels PRC citizens and entities to cooperate with PRC intelligence agencies upon request, which includes providing all information to the state and its intelligence apparatus. This policy supports and is reflective of the PRC's attempts to interfere in Canada and like-minded democracies. Canada and its allies must therefore exercise heightened caution when agreeing to share their data with platforms linked to the PRC. The ICA review process, which includes CSIS input, determined that allowing TikTok Canada to continue operating would cause injury to Canada's national security. Although the provisions of the ICA limit what I am able to disclose about specific cases, I would note that CSIS and the Government of Canada's assessment was consistent with the March 2024 policy statement on foreign investment review in the interactive digital media sector. Specifically, assessments consider factors such as reach and audience, the nature and extent of the investor's ties to a foreign government, and whether Canadian business is likely to be used as a vehicle by a foreign state to propagate disinformation or censor information in a manner that is consistent with Canadian rights and values. L'utilisation des médias sociaux.
Use of social media platforms also raises national security concerns when they act as a breeding ground for extremist ideologies and radicalized users. The increasing volume of violent rhetoric online it also raises concerns that consumers of this content are more likely to mobilize to violence. Youth, in particular, as they use social media platforms, can be especially vulnerable to becoming radicalized online. CSIS continues to actively investigate, advise on, and disrupt national security threats. CSIS is also committed to building resilience through our modernized authorities under Bill C-70. This new authority recognizes that protecting Canada's national security is a shared endeavor that includes partnering with all levels of government, Canadian communities, academia, the private sector, and others. CSIS is committed to cooperating with these groups in the national interest, including through increased sharing of detailed threat information. I will conclude by noting that while CSIS cannot publicly comment on our specific operational activities or investigations, I welcome this opportunity to answer your questions. Thank you.
Okay, merci.
Thank you, Mr. Rogers, for your opening remarks. We will start with the first round of questions. Mr. Cooper, you have the floor for 6 minutes. Go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. With respect to personal data being shared with the Beijing-based regime, you cited the 2017 national security law. Theoretically, it would seem to be true that there is a risk of data of Canadian users of TikTok to be shared with the PRC, but the position taken, the evidence we heard from TikTok when they came before this committee a few weeks ago was that that data had not been shared and that indeed a firewall had been set up to prevent the sharing of such data. Can you speak to that?
Well, I can speak to the first point, which is that we are concerned, there is concern about the risk of that data going to the PRC. As I think this committee has heard before, that data is not housed entirely in Canada, and there are questions about the applicability of Chinese law to Chinese companies, including the parent company of TikTok, which is ByteDance. So it is certainly foreseeable that data held by TikTok Canada could, as you suggested, end up in the hands of the People's Republic of China.
But at this point, it seems to me to be theoretical and nothing more than that.
Well, I can't speak publicly to any specific instance of data that's gotten there that we would have known through intelligence, but that is a certain risk that many of us are concerned with from a national security point of view.
And from the standpoint that it is a risk, how does shutting down the subsidiary of TikTok affect that in any way? It would seem to me that it is entirely unrelated, but to the degree that there is a risk, the risk continues, does it not?
I think it's a fair point. You're correct that the subsidiary TikTok Canada does not eliminate the use of the application here in Canada, nor the data that it holds. I would note it, going back to my opening remarks about the consistency of the decision with previous policy statements, and to say that the decision-making in that context is in an ICA process where certain events trigger decisions and reviews by the ICA, which is administered by ISED, and CSIS provides national security advice in the context of those triggered reviews.
Okay, thank you for that. And I will say, through you, Mr. Chair, that it is troubling to see the total lack of transparency on the part of this government with respect to this decision. Because the government, on one hand, is shutting down TikTok's subsidiary, but at the same time, Canadians are free to use the app. And I don't necessarily see why not, but there doesn't seem to be a consistency in terms of if the objective is concerned, for example, the use of personal information or personal data being shared with the Chinese Communist regime, the solution that the government has come up with doesn't seem to achieve that at all, but I would just try to at least understand from the theoretical standpoint of personal data being shared with the PRC that TikTok did set up Project Texas, which ensures that U.S. data stays in the U.S. So I'm trying to understand when you say that there is a risk and that some of that data could be shared and would not entirely be housed or to remain in Canada. Well, what do you mean by that? Because it could be stored in the U.S. or what?
The concern in general is that the parent company of TikTok Canada is a Chinese entity and subject to PRC laws, which could compel them to act in ways of getting data or using the platform for other means that China sees fit, or the Communist Party of China sees fit. And so that risk continues to exist.
Now, is it the case that the Chinese company, ByteDance, operates the algorithm and owns the algorithm?
That's my understanding.
Okay. And in terms of that operation, is it in China, in the PRC, that it is operated, that algorithm?
I'm not well placed to speak to
Okay.
the specific operations of TikTok. That would be a better question for them. But I imagine that there is a more distributed nature of that. I couldn't speak to that with any credibility.
Okay. So, because, I mean, it would certainly, at least from a theoretical standpoint, in terms of the risk, be an issue to the degree that the algorithm is operated by the Chinese company ByteDance. In order for the algorithm to work, data necessarily would have to be shared with ByteDance, and to the degree that the algorithm was being handled by ByteDance in that regard, then yes, pursuant to the 2017 national security laws, they could be compelled to share data with the Beijing-based regime. The problem that I see is that I don't see any evidence that that, in fact, has actually happened. It seems to be entirely theoretical.
Yeah. So we're over time. Mr. Rogers, do you have a quick response to that, or it was more a comment than it was a question, I think. But,
Right. I think I've answered that,
Okay.
but I'm happy to.
Okay. All right, so just for the benefit of committee, I did ask the clerk to reach out to TikTok to see if they would be available, because I thought they would be material to this discussion. And as you may or may not know, they did file a legal challenge against the federal government shutdown order. So not surprisingly, they declined to, or they weren't available to appear today. So, Mr. Housefather, you have 6 minutes. Go ahead.
Hey, thank you very much, and Director Rogers, welcome to the committee. Nice to see you, Mr. Lynn. So I just want to start because Mr. Cooper's questions were very good, but I don't think they related to the ICA decision, right? The ICA decision had nothing to do with Canadian users' privacy. It had to do with national security issues other than that, because otherwise we would have banned the app completely if we were dealing with the privacy issues, correct?
Well, the question, I hope this answers your question. I mean, you're right that the ICA decision was specific to TikTok Canada because that's the transaction that triggered the review. So, yeah, yes.
So if I look at that, TikTok Canada and their legal challenge argued that there were procedurally unfair things that happened related to the national security review. I presume you would disagree with that contention?
Well, what I think it's actually important for me to say that CSIS forms one part of that review. Our context in that review is to provide national security advice and assessments, which goes into a broader context of decision-making. Very appropriately, the overall decision is not made by CSIS, it's made by others, and there are protections around that decision, which include cabinet confidence, national security confidentiality, and information that might be proprietary to the companies. So there's a limit to what I can say, specifically also because there is a matter in front of the courts, to which I can't comment on. I can say that CSIS participated in the decision. We did provide national security advice related to the decision. And, as I mentioned in my opening remarks, the decision was consistent with the policy, and that's about what I can say.
I understand. So without asking you if CSIS gave, in its own advice, the decision to do what the end decision was, which was to require the company to close, can I ask you if CSIS, in its review, found significant security concerns posed by TikTok operations in Canada related to foreign influence?
Well, I can say that CSIS did provide national security advice, and that we did find that there were national security reasons to be concerned with TikTok Canada's establishment, and the ultimate decision was what it was.
And was one of the considerations what the American Congress decided to do, which is to say that within a certain amount of time they would have had to sell the company to a domestic or an American owner?
That's not an input that CSIS would have provided into this decision.
Okay, so you weren't looking at for anything other than the framework of the law to say yes or no, there are concerns that would require you then to take action.
That's correct. CSIS has a fairly prescribed role in that, which is to provide national security assessments to input into the decision-making process.
Okay, so then let me come back to the privacy questions that Mr. Cooper was asking. The former CSIS director, David Vigneault, had warned Canadians that they should steer clear of the TikTok app because it poses a data security risk. Would you concur with that advice? Is that also your advice?
I think Mr. Vigneault made a reasonable statement there. I think I have to stick with my role in CSIS, which is to not make decisions or recommendations on behalf of the government. I can certainly be clear that there are national security risks that we would assess inherent to TikTok as the platform, relating to what I described earlier about the potential for data, algorithms, and other things to be used by the PRC contrary to Canada's interests.
Well, while I have you here, is CSIS currently, or has CSIS reviewed the algorithms of TikTok to determine if misinformation is being circulated on TikTok in different areas? For example, anti-Semitism. Is TikTok's algorithms furthering anti-Semitism in Canada by teaching a narrative that turns people or users against the state of Israel?
I will certainly say that rhetoric and narratives like the narratives that you describe are pervasive across many social media platforms, not just TikTok Canada. I don't have a specific point to raise here about TikTok Canada's algorithm specifically in relation to that. As I mentioned earlier, we're very concerned with the amount of content online that serves to radicalize particularly youth against any number of targets, including the Jewish community, the LGBT community, and many other targets. That's a trend that we're consistently worried about and increasingly worried about.
So would I be at least correct in assuming that this is ongoing activity that CSIS is looking at with respect to monitoring extremism coming through the TikTok platform and other similar platforms that are being used today in Canada?
Yes, TikTok and other platforms. In fact, we and our Five Eyes allies, along with our law enforcement allies, recently put out press release and guidance related to the radicalization of youth online very specifically. It's a challenge for us investigatively because often people are radicalized only online, and particularly youth. So that is a worrying trend.
Thank you. Do I have any time left, Mr. Chair? A minute 10?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Sorry, you're still stuck with me. So let me come back. The algorithm, you mentioned TikTok Canada's algorithm. TikTok Canada's algorithm, in my understanding, would be no different than the algorithm being used by TikTok in the United States and in other countries, at least according to what I've heard from TikTok. So one of the issues related to what I understand has happened in TikTok is considerable misinformation has been floated for the 2016, 2020, and possibly the 2024 U.S. elections through the TikTok platform. Has CSIS looked at what we would need to do to protect ourselves in the 2025 Canadian election that we expect to have next year?
Well, CSIS has been very preoccupied with the concerns around foreign interference in elections, as I'm sure you're aware. That includes the possibility for threat actors to use social media platforms to advance disinformation or other narratives harmful to Canada's interests. I would say that that's not a platform-specific concern that we have. That's more around the intent and plans of foreign adversaries to use platforms however they might get their
because
names.
I know my time is, but I'm talking specifically in terms of the government of Canada, the government of China, a foreign adversary. We have a special parliamentary committee dealing with China, using their algorithm on TikTok, which we understand could be controlled by the Chinese government or certainly Chinese sources, to try to help one side or another in a Canadian election.
You know you're over, and I need a very quick response.
Yeah, very succinct.
I'm going to give you a quick response, Mr.
My succinct response is that is one of the concerns that we worry about based on the PRC's law and the use of TikTok.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Housefather. Monsieur Villemure pour 6 minutes.
For 6 minutes, please go ahead. Thank you, Chair. Thank you for being with us. We talked about in-depth investigation. What's an in-depth investigation?
Examination. It depends. In the context of an investigation, this might be an investigation into a particular threat actor. In the context of TikTok and the ICA, this would be a review of the activities of a particular company, its ties to foreign governments, any particular data that CSIS might have in its intelligence holdings that might inform the potential for a foreign actor to make use of a transaction contrary to Canada's interests.
OK. Est-ce qu'on
Could you give us a bit more detail about the national security risks that led to the shutting down of TikTok? Yes, a little. As I said, I cannot talk about very specific detail.
In this case, as mentioned, there are concerns about the use of TikTok as a platform more generally. TikTok Canada is obviously affiliated with that platform, and those two things are not unrelated. I can't speak to the specific concerns that we would have with respect to TikTok Canada, given the issues I raised earlier.
Non, ben, ça c'est très bien. La raison de ma question était simple.
Well, I asked the question for a simple reason, because in the past we saw the national security reason interpreted in a very wide manner. So can you talk to us about ByteDance? We know ByteDance owns TikTok, but do they have other activities? ByteDance's activities in general and the ownership structure?
It's a Chinese company. That is the main preoccupation with us in the context of this review. It certainly operates TikTok, the application, which is a global application that hosts many, many millions of users. It is subject to the PRC national security regulations, and it has the potential to be used by China, contrary to Canada's interests. Désolé, je ne sais pas si j'ai répondu à votre...
I don't know if I answered your question. So who owns ByteDance? I do not know exactly. Because we often hear that there are French people on the board, but there is also the founding owner who is present in the ownership structure. The founder of ByteDance, or of TikTok rather, is still in the ownership structure. I do not know, and I don't want to give you incorrect information. Other than sharing information with the Communist Party of China, is there any other form of collaboration or cooperation between TikTok, ByteDance, and the government of China? What I can say is that, as Mr. Cooper said, we know that China's national security legislation applies to ByteDance and TikTok's operations.
Specific intelligence we would have that links anything concrete that we would know through intelligence channels.
Est-ce que dans le cadre de votre enquête au nom du...
In the review you did for the department, did you talk to the Privacy Commissioner?
Privacy Commissioner regularly. In the context of these reviews, typically the assessment is done by CSIS based on its intelligence knowledge and its threat assessments.
Est-ce que ce genre de revue-là, elle a lieu...
Do you often conduct these kinds of reviews? Do you have other examples? I think CSIS has done more than 1,000 last year. Okay. The final report, it's not available, is it? Our opinion to the government? No. It is not publicly available. It is...
Our advice to government, it is often subject to other provisions like cabinet confidence in the decision-making process. And as I mentioned earlier, it will contain classified information and sometimes private information from the company.
Merci. Parce que le sujet que j'ai...
Thank you. Well, Mr. Cooper referred to this because we're being told, yes, TikTok needs to be shut down, but if you want, if it's your choice, if you want to keep using it, it's a bit paradoxical in my opinion. So the decision of the Government of Canada to ban TikTok from government devices, was it informed by your information?
Treasury Board Canada. From our point of view, data collection by TikTok, particularly against government devices, could cause particular national security concerns, and I think those are in some level different than the general use of TikTok. I should say that the decision-making process for many of these decisions, not just the Investment Canada Act, but the Government of Canada's decision to ban them on government devices, takes into account many different factors, not just national security. It can include economic factors, social factors, and others. When it comes to government decisions, we think about government data particularly and the particular national security concerns that would be inherent to that data.
Utilisez-vous TikTok?
No.
Monsieur Lind?
Do you use TikTok? Mr. Lind, do you use TikTok? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I don't use TikTok either. I don't have a reason to.
Mr. Green, 6 minutes. Do you use TikTok?
I did, yeah,
did,
quite regularly, and in fact stopped once the Canada-China investigations revealed targeting of MPs. Certainly, the list of social media interference or influence within democratic political election processes are well noted and well documented. Going back to 2016, you'll recall Cambridge Analytica. Lots of instances around Elon Musk's participation in the most recent election in the States. So through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Rogers, first of all, welcome to committee. I think this might be the first time I've had a chance to chat with you. In your opinion, how does TikTok differ materially from the way in which user information, data, algorithms, and profiles are used from other social media platforms?
Thank you for the question. To the extent that I can answer it, what I will say is that there are general concerns that Canadians or others may have around social media platforms that we're engaged in. Things like the spread of disinformation, the ability for those platforms to be used by people to radicalize Canadians or those who might seek to do harm to Canada. That's not something unique to TikTok. It's something that is generally done across social media platforms. The concerns that tend to be particular to TikTok have to do, again, with the regime that it can operate under because it is hosted and controlled, in theory, by China and the national security laws. We know that, what important factor of data is how it can be used. And in Canada and in other countries, there are differing privacy protections, legal recourse. In Canada, we have charter protections. There are many things that are inherent to our country that are not the same in China.
In your review, do you have any evidence or intelligence that you're able to publicly share that would indicate that TikTok had broken any Canadian laws?
Well, I can say that in our review, we were clear in the decision-making process about the national security concerns related to TikTok Canada as an element of our decision-making. I can't speak to the specifics on those, but I will also say that it doesn't require TikTok to have broken Canadian laws for us to have national security concerns, and that's.
Do you have? Sorry, my time's limited, so I have to take it back. Do you have concerns of other platforms? For instance, Truth Social, X, Discord, WhatsApp. We're talking about this hopefully in a more comprehensive way than just targeting one platform. Would you care to comment on the threats for radicalization, as you've mentioned numerous times here at committee, from the other platforms?
Our concerns around the spread of information and radicalization are not specific to a particular platform, and nor have we, at least to my knowledge, I've only been the director for 6 weeks, but to my knowledge, we've not conducted such a similar review of either of any of those platforms at this stage, certainly not as part of the ICA process. As I've said, our concerns are to do more with the content and the potential for Canadians to be radicalized on those platforms.
Define radicalization. You use the term, but what does that mean legally?
Yeah, thank you for asking. And in our context, that typically means I use it as shorthand for radicalization to violence. So what we're concerned with is not There is a threshold. People are allowed to have a freedom of expression in Canada. People can say what they wish in social media, and they can consume the information that they wish. But radicalization for us is the process that someone may go through to take what are beliefs and translate that into the potential or the intention to commit violence and harm people here in Canada. My colleague Paul, I don't know if you have anything you want to add on radicalization.
Yeah, I would say that's essentially accurate. It's mobilizing towards providing support to violence or conducting a violent act.
What would be some examples of that in Canada recently?
Well, you've seen probably a number of arrests relating to individuals who have espoused radical ideologies and may have been planning attacks, in some cases youths. Examples of that include people who live in an echo chamber online and may have fewer connections outside to temper their what they increase.
Those aren't examples. Those are generalities. Like, to be specific, the Quebec City massacre at the mosque, Ibrahim Jami Mosque in Hamilton firebombed, the London family who were run down. Would those be specific examples of radicalization?
I don't want to get that wrong. We have seen, and I won't use the name, I certainly know that some of the arrests that have been made this year have been linked to radicalization online as a primary factor. I don't want to give you misinformation and give you the wrong name associated with that, but I'm happy to report back if that's helpful.
If you're able, can you list in the case of TikTok the principal national security risks that you identified that led to the Government of Canada's decision to order it to wind up?
I can't speak to the specifics other than to say that we provided a national security assessment that highlighted some national security risks.
Are you okay? So what would be the risks of disclosing to this committee some of this information publicly?
Well, for one, I think there are decision-making privileges in cabinet confidence that we have to respect as part of the government's decision-making. Also, there is a matter before the courts that will have to go through a fair process there, and I need to be conscious that that process hasn't yet unfolded. And there may be classified information that could reveal sources or techniques or may have been shared with us by our allies who would not allow us to describe it publicly.
So, obviously, under the CSIS Act, you have a duty of candor to the courts. If in the process of the civil case you're asked these questions, you'll be forced to, in fact, disclose this. It's not correct?
Well, I can't offer specific legal advice. I know that there are processes to protect information in various legal proceedings in Canada, which which may be applicable in this case. I have not done a detailed review of how this case might unfold and what information might come to light.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Green. Thank you, Mr. Rogers. That concludes our first round, and I'm sure there will be lots of eyes on this court case for sure. Mr. Barrett, you have 5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
With respect to the decision that was taken under the Investment Canada Act, what alternatives or other options are available other than a complete shutdown of an entity here in Canada?
Some of those questions may be better directed to ISED Canada, who applies most of this act. And again, our input is limited to providing a national security assessment. That said, I do understand that there are other options available, including applying mitigation mechanisms, but I wouldn't want to speak to that on their behalf.
Okay. And is there a type of mitigation in for example, that you could offer?
None comes to mind right away. I apologize, that's not CSIS's area of expertise in the Act.
Okay, so if there's a national security risk so great that under the Investment Canada Act that the headquarters of this entity has been shut down or ordered shut down in Canada, but users, Canadians, are not restricted in their use of it, what are Canadians to make of that when the risk is so great that the government has ordered the shutdown of this entity? However, please feel free to continue to use the app. Well, what's the message that Canadians should take away from that?
Well, I can say from CSIS's perspective that we've been clear, as I have now, about the risks of the app itself.
Okay, so if I can you be clear? Should Canadians continue to use TikTok?
We have said, and I will say now, that there are national security concerns that we have around the use of TikTok in general, which includes the aggregate amount of data and the ability for the Chinese government to make use of that platform in ways contrary to the interests of Canada.
So you're saying Canadians should or should not use it?
I'm saying that the decision of a government to provide such a recommendation or decision to Canadians is best not made by CSIS. CSIS will provide a national security assessment, but it's very important that other factors be brought into those decisions. And the decision on TikTok Canada is very distinct from the decision on TikTok in general because there are very different factors in play.
Okay, so under the distinct question of whether or not individual Canadians, I'm not talking about a ban, I'm just talking about advice. You're the director of the leading organization in Canada's intelligence apparatus. You are at the foremost of this and at the forefront of this, and though new in role, appointed to it because of your qualifications with extensive experience in the intelligence community in Canada. Should Canadians continue to use TikTok? I'm not asking if the government should ban it for Canadians. I'm asking if, as the head of CSIS, if you believe it's wise for individual Canadians to use it.
I think that there's a very big distinction between an individual's choice to use something and the aggregate effect on Canadian national security. And so, for me, if I can give you a personal example, when I was young, I did not expect to be the director of CSIS. At the time, I may have looked at the information available to me and made a decision to continue to use TikTok because I wouldn't have thought that even if China had my information, I would have cared. I now care because I'm the director of CSIS. My perspective is that individuals need to consider their own risks, and that is an important factor in their making a determination. At this stage, I can't speak for government, but I can say there are risks that I hope Canadians consider when they personally decide whether to use TikTok or not.
So you talk about the aggregation of the data, the information, the pictures, the geolocation, the patterns, the habits of individual Canadians, that information being taken, potentially used by the communist dictatorship in Beijing, and aggregated. But with respect to the risks to individual users, I have just about a minute left. What are the risks to individual users, those younger Canadians, the young Mr. Rogers, the future director of CSIS? What are the risks to him in 50 seconds, sir?
Right. Well, one of those risks, and if the concern is that the Chinese government may access that data, they have seen, as we know, to engage in foreign interference in acts of transnational repression and other things that are contrary to the individual and collective interests of Canada. An individual now making use of TikTok would have to be aware that their data may be subject to that regime. And if you were someone who is vocally counter to the government of China or the Chinese Communist Party, you may have particular concerns immediately. If you are someone who's not in that situation, you may eventually have those concerns, and you'll have to take into account as an individual whether you want to take that risk.
And in my last few seconds, I hear concerns from businesses who operate, who sell their products here in Canada using TikToks, locally owned businesses in my community. What do I say to them? Should they also be concerned?
I think that the same advice applies. The data and the use of TikTok will be available through the regime that we've described, and they'll have to make those decisions.
Thank you.
Okay. Good discussion, Mr. Rogers. Just to let everybody know, I'm going to go to Mr. Baines for 5, M. Villemire pour 2 minutes et 30 secondes, et M. Green pour la même, et on va compléter cette...
So we'll do a round, but then we will end this meeting.
5 minutes, sir. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our security intelligence representatives for joining us today. Actually, I'd like to take a moment just to thank you for your work and your proactive efforts on community engagement and the work with respect to Bill C-70, specifically on the Security of Information Act and strengthening something that hasn't been done in over 20 years and the work that you did there. So I want to thank you for your efforts there and the department's efforts there. I wanted to start with just stating prolonged operations by TikTok could allow foreign actors to exploit Canadian user data or spreading disinformation. This is an accurate statement in your mind, Director Rogers?
I think I missed the beginning of your question. I think you asked whether TikTok Canada could allow for the spread of TikTok could allow for the spread of disinformation. Yes, that's true, and it's true of other social media platforms also.
So, yes, specifically, I said the operations by TikTok could allow foreign actors to exploit Canadian user data and spread disinformation. That's accurate?
Yes, that's accurate.
Okay, and CSIS, in terms of providing guidance on timelines for winding down the activities of TikTok to minimize potential risk to public safety and our democratic integrity, like what's been done?
Our role is to provide advice to the government in that regard. We've provided advice on a number of decision points, including the most recent one to wind up TikTok Canada. We also collect intelligence, obviously, and where we can collect intelligence that informs the government on how social media platforms are used by foreign adversaries or anyone who would seek to undermine the security of Canada, we would do that. And that classified information would factor into future government decisions.
Okay, and just going back to what my colleague, Mr. Barrett, raised, like having the physical presence of TikTok here on Canadian soil versus concerns about the app. Can you distinguish the difference between that?
Yes, as has been pointed out, the app itself can continue to run independent of the presence of TikTok Canada. I think
Is there a difference between the risk, like, having it here? Like, is it important for us not to even have it on our soil versus the app itself? I understand that they can continue to produce the information and take the data and use algorithms to scrape people's information on what they're doing. But that's the question.
Yeah, I think what I can say there is that the review of TikTok Canada individually did raise some national security concerns that were unique to that transaction, because in the context of the Investment Canada Act, we review that transaction itself. And that was factored into the government's decision at this time.
Okay, and you talked about our allied partners, Five Eyes. The government's aligned itself with our allies in recognizing the risks posed by TikTok. So how does CSIS assess Canada's response to these risks compared to our allies? Like, what are they doing? Are you all exchanging information to say, yes, this is working, this is not working?
It's a very good question. Each of our allies have different regimes for reviewing investment, for being able to, place controls on applications and other sorts of legislative frameworks. So it's not a one-to-one comparison. For CSIS, our primary activity is to make sure that we share and compare intelligence and assessments with our Five Eyes allies. This will include the activities of, for instance, China, and others as it relates to the use of social media platforms like TikTok, and I suppose where possible, where mitigation measures have proven effective by doing intelligence collection.
Are you able to measure, like, TikTok is being used by yes, it's based out of China, it's a China company, but it's being used by billions of people. And are you able to identify certain maybe hostile nations using it more versus others?
I'll invite my colleague to jump in if he knows more than I do. We've certainly seen foreign actors use many social media platforms, including TikTok. We've been fairly public about concerns around disinformation, misinformation, and influence done by Russia, China, and others. Paul, did you want to?
Sure. I would say the concern with TikTok is specific to its association with the PRC. As has been mentioned here, TikTok collects a lot of personal data, has access to a lot of personal data on your device. And CSIS has been very public in warning about the risks of using TikTok, and it's very clear that there's a strategy on the part of the PRC to collect big data, personal data from all around the world, and collect it. Now, the PRC is also the primary threat actor in Canada conducting foreign interference. So when you have that size of vast collected personal data, and then on top of that you could put AI and machine learning, then you could use that to sort through that data and then use it back against people. And so you could use it for foreign interference, for targeting individuals, for cyber attacks, for intimidating, influencing, and compromising in the future. And so this is really the concern, is the vast access that TikTok allows to personal data and the fact that the PRC national security laws would compel it to share that data with them.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Baines. And I really felt it important that Mr. Lind answer that question. So you had a lot more time there than normal, but it was an important response. Thank you, Mr. Lind. Monsieur Villemure, 2 minutes 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Non, 2 minutes 30, c'est pas très long. Hein?
2 minutes and 30 seconds isn't a lot of time. Are we seeing an uptick or an increase in the activities of the government of China in terms of interference, for instance, here in Canada? Is it going up? Is it increasing?
Certainly see continued foreign interference by the PRC here in Canada, and that's been something that has been maybe spectacularly public over the last little while, and something that concerns CSIS. We are concerned with it in this context, specifically in the potential use of social media to be able to provide narratives beneficial to the PRC that may be disinformation or contrary to Canadian interests.
Vous parliez de radicalisation un peu plus tôt.
You talked about radicalization. I've heard that the government of China seeks to create chaos through narratives. Do you see an uptick in some themes, such as religion or others? What are the themes or topics that are coming up?
Les thèmes, je pense, et peut-être Paul, tu veux dire quelque chose?
Maybe Paul can add some elements?
Really seeking to ensure pro-PRC narratives across the community, and that's something that we've seen fairly regularly. It's not necessarily about causing chaos, but it's promoting a narrative that serves its own interests, whether to make its interests, or to make it more appealing to Canadians to follow a Chinese perspective, which may be contrary to Canadians, and to try and influence particularly Chinese diaspora here in Canada. Paul, is there anything you wanted to add?
Yeah, all I would say is that, you know, its primary focus is to protect the Communist Party of China. And what we're most concerned about from CSIS perspective is the foreign interference here in Canada in terms of them trying to achieve their objectives for their own foreign policy in Canada. So in terms of, I wouldn't have the detail handy for different themes of what they've been involved in, but our concern really is foreign interference here in Canada on behalf of the PRC.
Voyez-vous une différence sur l'utilisation de l'anglais, le chinois ou le...
Do you see any difference in terms of the use of English, French, or Chinese? Well, it's a good question. I don't know if the Chinese use English or French more here in Canada, but I know that they use any and all methods as long as they're effective.
In general, you know, there's a much more substantial English ecosystem in the United States, for example, which tends to have an effect on English-speaking Canadians or French-speaking Canadians who consume English media.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci.
Merci, Monsieur Villemure. Mr. Green, 2.5 minutes. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. Perhaps the director can answer a question that TikTok itself couldn't answer, or at least wouldn't even entertain. From your perspective, as a member of Parliament, why should I not be on TikTok?
That's an excellent question. I think that the risks that I mentioned earlier in one of my responses apply especially to members of Parliament who may find themselves of interest to the Chinese government as a target of their influence. If your data is on TikTok, and if China avails itself of that data, they may seek to understand more about you, more about your personal networks, and more about the ecosystem that you work in to be able to target foreign interference, espionage, cyber attacks, or other things toward you. Obviously, as members of Parliament, you have particular access and influence in the government that most people don't enjoy, and I can imagine why you would be particularly interesting targets for government of China.
How is that different from the other platforms? I mean, presumably we're in a surveillance capitalism, setting aside the state capitalist country of China. What's to say the Chinese government or the Indian government or the Russian government or the Israeli government or the American government couldn't simply just buy that information directly from Meta, from X, or from any of the other actors that provide these types of platforms?
Another good question. I will certainly not say that TikTok is the only concern we have with respect to Chinese access to data and its influence activities. It is certainly one of the things that we're concerned about, particularly given its the potential for its national security law to apply directly to a company headquartered in China. One of the primary differences between TikTok and others, and between China and others, is that China has shown a history of engaging in foreign interference activities specific to Canada. It has a very sophisticated and capable cyber program for intelligence collection and espionage, and tends to be the #1 cyber actor prominent in Canada. So with respect to which government, I think China's distinguished itself in a number of ways.
Does your threat assessment change if the same type of activities are being observed by a quote-unquote ally?
I think CSIS's act and mandate is not country-specific. We look at anything that meets a national security threshold for us and is contrary to Canada's national security interests. Right now, that certainly includes the PRC and tends not to include our allies.
But wouldn't it be rational to think that we're more influenced by American media and American information than we are any other foreign actor?
American media and, as I was mentioning earlier, the targeting of disinformation by certain foreign actors toward an American ecosystem certainly has knock-on effects for Canadians who consume information in that ecosystem also.
Interesting. Wasn't exactly the question I asked, but an interesting response. Thank you very much. I know my time is up, and I'll just say, Mr. Chair, I'm still with more questions than we have answers around this, and I would really appreciate any information through you, Mr. Chair, to Mr. Rogers, even if it's at the direction of an in-camera briefing. I feel as an opposition member, Mr. Chair, and I'm not saying this as a point of privilege, but I'll put it out there, that we don't have all the information still to provide any kind of real analysis on this. So thank you very much, Mr.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Green. And on that point, I would certainly leave it to the discretion of yourself and other committee members just how you would want to handle this. The motion that was passed by the committee was to deal with this in the manner in which we are. There were specific requests for witnesses that were placed before us, and we're doing everything we can through the clerk to make sure that we have those witnesses in front of us. But I'll leave it to your discretion which way you want to go with this. Now, I believe that, do we have any other witnesses on this that Monsieur Vigneault, who we're still trying to get a hold of as the former director of CSIS as well. And then, of course, as I mentioned, I did invite TikTok. They weren't part of the motion, but as I said, I thought they were germane to the study, and they respectfully declined, given the circumstances, I assume, that they're now facing with the civil case. So, and the minister as well, I'm reminded, who has indicated to us that he will be available by the end of January or at the end of January. So that, I think, would be an interesting meeting as well. So we'll see what we can do to get everyone here, okay? So that being said, I don't have any other business, Ms. Shanahan. I'm going to go ahead.
Excellent. Just, are you planning a meeting for the 17th?
I'm leaving it open right now. I will give an indication to the committee. It's very difficult proposition for me to say just no at this point. I don't know what's going to come up, but you'll have an advance warning, and I understand there's an event that night that you need to be at. So, look, Mr. Lynn and Mr. Rogers, I do want to say on behalf of the committee, congratulations on your appointment. I can't imagine the work that you have in front of you. This committee has been engaged and involved in the issue of foreign interference, disinformation and misinformation, which I'm old enough to remember that used to be called lying. But you've certainly got a challenge ahead of you, and I want to thank you on behalf of the committee and on behalf of Canadians, and congratulate you on your appointment for being here today and dealing with the questions of the committee.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
Okay, so that's it. Have a great weekend, everyone. Safe travels, and the meeting is adjourned.